I'll tell you about that.
Welcome, everyone, to the first edition of What Happened This Week in Public Education for Fun Georgia's Future. I am Stephen Owens, the Education Director at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. And as always, I'm joined by Mikayla Arciaga from the Intercultural Development Research Association. Mikayla, how are you doing?
I am going. It has been a week. Also, you can just call us IDRA. It is so much easier.
I will from here on out. Before we get going, I need to give a message from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Anxiety. Anxiety is the official sponsor of the Georgia General Assembly. When public education advocates watch terrible things happening with the full endorsement of state leaders, how can they resist partaking in Anxiety? Anxiety, keeping you alert in Georgia since 1733. Okay. All silliness aside, Mikayla, as a member of Fun Georgia's Future, what are things that you have watched this week and leading up into crossover day? And if you don't mind, just giving like a quick summary of what crossover day is.
So I'll be honest, I think that like what has unfortunately dominated the conversation, not just in Metro Atlanta, but also in our General Assembly, is this conversation around Buckhead City. It has dominated what should otherwise be like meaningful work in the assembly. But thankfully those bills were killed yesterday. They had huge financial implications for the entire state. They had huge implications for some of the metro school districts. But those bills got killed. Well, one of the bills got killed yesterday, but that is unfortunately where I've had to spend a lot of my time this week because I live in Buckhead and I would really like to not see us secede from the city of Atlanta.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of my work this week has been colored kind of by that conversation. But that doesn't mean that we didn't see some really ridiculous things happen in education. And I just have to say thank you so much to the House. First of all, Chris Irwin, our new House Education Committee chair, is running these meetings like the former educator that he is, with this like wonderful efficiency that is just so soothing compared to what is happening and the shenanigans on the Senate side. So the House has not had a ton of particularly concerning things happening. We can talk a little bit about House Bill 101, but I'll come to that since that just happened today. On the Senate side of things, this starts last Friday, where we found out we were going to have a 7 a.m. Senate hearing Monday morning with no agenda. The agenda was not uploaded to the website all weekend, so all of us were speculating about which terrible bill we were going to see Sunday morning or Monday morning. And it turns out that they sent the agenda out 5:45 on Friday afternoon, which is why only a select few people knew that it knew what was actually going to be heard. And then they still ended up, I think, editing the agenda anyway. So we had I think 5 bills heard on Monday. They were all pretty uneventful, if I'm completely honest. Nothing of particular note. It was really a lot of I honestly can't even remember now at this point.
Is that when they discussed Senate Bill 147?
Yeah. No, that was Wednesday, okay, because that happened right before we talked about Senate Bill 88. But that is a great question. Because a lot of things were happening. What day was that? Today? Was that today, the 27th? And then this whole week was so this week, honestly, it was pretty uneventful, I'll be quite honest. We didn't see a lot of anything spicy Monday morning. I honestly think they were just trying to get bills through. Tuesday we had
that was 88.
Yeah, Tuesday was 88. Wednesday was 88.
Tell us what 88 is.
All right. Senate Bill 88 was originally was designated as our Don't Say Gay bill, and this one had, when it first came out, was just stunningly bad. It had implications that it impacted mandatory reporting standards by requiring teachers to disclose conversations or actually get prior written approval from parents if they were going to have any conversations around sexual orientation, gender identity, or anything of that nature. And in theory, that has, I mean, I think that everybody's like, of course, why wouldn't we want teachers to like make sure that they're signing off with parents? But in reality, what that looks like is like, if I had a kid and I taught teenagers, if I had a kid come tell me, hey, I'm having a fight with my boyfriend, I'm automatically, regardless of the gender identity of my student or sexual orientation of my student, that is a conversation around their sexual orientation.
Right.
Thinking about their relationships. Or it's like one of my kids comes to me and says, hey, I have a crush on this person. And they said something kind of mean to me. I don't know what to do about that. That's still a conversation around sexual orientation or gender identity. Even if I'm just focusing on like, hey, I want you to have a healthy relationship with your friends and peers. That, and it's like, am I supposed to have a conversation with the parent before that even happens? Am I supposed to say, stop right there? I can't talk to you about this because I haven't talked to your parent about whether or not I can. And that raises a lot of concerns about whether or not we're going to keep kids safe and if we are able to keep kids safe at school.
Right.
I think teachers kind of defer to like, we want parents to be involved, but but requiring like pre-written approval was concerning. And especially when it comes to things that like might be a little less benign, like, hey, like I had a kid come to school with a black eye one day.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, so am I supposed to call the parent and say, hey, I saw your kid had the black eye. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to talk to them before I actually talk to them, even if you're the one that gave them the black eye. Which ended up being the case when I was teaching. It just raises a lot of concerns about like how teachers were supposed to address issues that we are required to report about. That is a reality of the job of being a teacher. And actually this covered not just teachers, but a lot of like child-facing adults that do like summer camps or libraries or nonprofits even. It had a lot of implications for people that might work with young people, and they did not have a lot of great answers the first time around. This bill has since been changed quite a bit, and actually they pulled a lot of the issues around public schools out of it, and actually we're just focusing on summer camps and private schools, which feels like a very weird area to be focusing on. And come to find out, it's because of some of the woke movements happening in our private schools, I guess, which was a weird juxtaposition because actually on Tuesday we heard our gigantic voucher bill, Senate Bill 233 was heard, where we heard all about how private schools are going to solve all the ills of the public education system.
To your point though, did you notice that they never mentioned private schools? They kept on referring to like other educational situations. So go back, and maybe you already mentioned this. Senate Bill 88 roundly, like people recognize there were problems across the board. It was tabled. Unless it gets shoved into another bill later on, it is dead per session. But yeah, so to your point about like how the juxtaposition of like looking at private schools now as this kind of like savior for kids who are struggling in a one-size-fits-all system. I was struck by those two things. One, they said one size fits all like so many times. At least three times. And they never mentioned private schools. They like at one point, Senator Dolezal, who's the author of this bill from Forsyth, he said, so that a parent can take their kids to, and then he stopped and he said, other educational, I think that maybe private schools don't hold that well.
No, I think right. And especially even with some of like the rural folks on that, not that we have very many on our Senate Ed anymore, but I think in general, it does not pull well, particularly I think with rural folks. And I think it's you who pointed out like rural private schools do not have the same kind of aura as some of our metro private schools. And so I think you're right. It is interesting to watch the talking points evolve as we go.
It was frustrating to watch. So I watched this. So just so y'all know, I'm on parental leave. I watched this in the middle of the night, holding my newborn baby, and was just like frustratingly bouncing. We're talking about the largest voucher increase in state history if it passes as it's written right now, $6,000 for every single child.
And why is that such a large? Because we have like what, $120 million voucher, $120 million
voucher. That's right, but that's it's a tax credit. It's capped by that amount. This voucher is you don't have to do a runaround to not pay your taxes and then get this to private school. This is available to every single child in public school right now, and all kids entering pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. So even people who are going to send their kids to private school anyway, they can apply for this voucher. And so without a cap on it, yeah, we could easily see hundreds of millions of dollars every single year added on top of this with no income requirements or anything. And you might,
if we look at just kids enrolled in public ed right now, and we count out the graduating seniors, we have 1.6 million kids in the Georgia public education system.
A tiny fraction of that means hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's insane.
And you might be thinking, oh, I'm sure they talked about it for hours. I'm sure they had several hearings on this issue. No, they talked for 49 minutes. They cut off public comment. They made sure that one of the speakers at the top of the, go ahead.
I think it's just really interesting. So I was there and I had signed up to speak. We had a line. We had 27 people signed up to speak that day. And when we got the final count, it was 15 people signed up to speak opposed to Senate Bill 233. And 11 people signed up to speak for Senate Bill 233. And immediately when they started pulling public comment, the first person to get up and speak said, oh, I was signed up last. I didn't think I was going to get a chance. And we immediately knew how that hearing was going to go.
That's right.
And the chair went ahead and started cherry picking his public testimony. I think the one shocking moment was the woman who was not called upon interjecting herself into the public comment and going on a racist tirade about how this is going to incentivize more illegal aliens, that's her words, not mine, to come to Georgia because we're paying for their education. That neglects whether or not there is a Supreme Court requirement that we educate all children, regardless of their documentation status, which we do. But it was and I think what was really great is I didn't figure out that she was unexpected until afterwards.
Oh yeah, I'm just now learning that.
But I feel like if you're gonna mess with the public comment system and you're gonna pull kind of shady behavior like that, I think having someone really highlighting the racist history and the racist connections of vouchers and the privatization movement in general is really earned at that point.
And it's important to recognize too, the groups pushing for this are very well funded. And I bring this up not just to say, look at the evil empire, but this bill was not just thought of the past week. It was chosen to be listed at the very last second so that the people couldn't speak into this bill. Because it is harder to get a bill across the line if you allow everyone to come in and say exactly why something is wrong. And so we just got notice that this bill is on the calendar for Monday for crossover day. You got any predictions for Monday?
I don't do it anymore. I don't play that game anymore because I've been shocked and I have been burned and I have been, I hate playing that game. I will say we have a couple explicit committed no's from the majority party. I don't know if it's enough.
Yeah.
But we do have quite a few. I'm interested to see who will speak against it in the well.
Yeah.
I think our historic heavy hitters have always done a really good job. I think Elena Parent, I think she's caucus chair, is planned to speak, but I honestly don't know. I think I learned this lesson the hard way last year. There were bills that I thought were too crazy to possibly even consider that passed through. And I think when we're talking about the politics of an increasingly radical party, there's no predictability there for a reason. So I don't know.
I also have no idea. I've heard it both ways. I've heard folks say that they don't have the votes for this. And then I was just on a call when they were saying some Democrats who are usually anti-vouchers are getting cold feet, that they're tired of being seen as obstructionists. And I get that from an interpersonal level, but not from a political level, if that's what you're elected to stand for. But yeah, that'll be on the calendar for Monday. Senate Bill 147.
Yes.
What did you take away, or tell us a little bit about what that bill is?
So that was the one that was heard right before Senate Bill 88. So that, I think, and the chair again rushed public comment. He only gave people a minute to try and capture the nuance of some of these poorly written and poorly conceived bills, which it sounds kind of like House Bill 140, or sorry, Senate Bill 147 is. But basically, what I understood from Buddy Costley, who is a former 11-year superintendent. He is, I think, the representative of the Georgia Association of Educational Leaders.
That's correct.
Pointed out that what this bill does is remove some of the administrative processes for kids to attend school in a district that is not their home district. Which I think in general I'm not necessarily opposed to. But when I say that it's removing administrative processes, it's because there's a process already in place. And that process includes administrative hurdles because we allot funding, particularly in rural districts that can't afford to tax the amount of fund they need to educate kids in their districts. And so what's concerning about this new language is that it removes some of those processes that protect those dollars. And so what Buddy Costley raised as a concern is that equalization grants are paid out to rural districts. But if a child from a rural district decides to move to a higher population district to attend school there, right now, the way this bill is written, those dollars will follow them. And that was the biggest concern, is that these grants that we pay out to make sure that rural districts are able to provide the services to their kids that they need, would leave with other kids if we don't make sure that we are shoring up those processes correctly.
And it would only hurt low wealth school districts, because if you leave one of the richer school districts, the Rabun counties of this world, and go to a lower wealth school district, they don't get any equalization grant because they have plenty of tax revenue. I mean, this is a good and right, that grant is good and right to have in place. It would only work the opposite way if you're going from a low wealth to a high wealth district. And
so that was the interesting thing that was raised, is that they used Gwinnett County as an example for receiving equalization grants. And Buddy did a great job of pointing out that Gwinnett's population is specifically unique because the student population exceeds what is actually able to be raised in tax funding.
That's right.
From that county. And so he said it's disingenuous to use Gwinnett County as the example for why we need this, when overwhelmingly, like you said, it is only going to harm all of the poorer rural districts.
Exactly.
Gwinnett is the only outlier.
And I think the picture in a lot of lawmakers' minds is Gwinnett being this white flight rich county has not been true for 30 years.
Right.
Like it has been changing significantly. It is and there's a lot of diversity of income in that county, and it's the largest county by a mile as far as school districts. It's got 1 out of every 10 students in the state of Georgia is in that school system. So you're right, it's completely disingenuous. I'm of the mind that is such a sloppy bill that even the author didn't realize the full extent of how that, and we'll see some changes on that if that's ever going to go forward. Because I'm with you too, that like I don't want anybody going to jail because they want to get their kid a better education for the next county over. We should not have a system where Clayton County has much lower resources schools than Fayette County right next door. But let's just make sure that all school districts have the resources. Let's not come up with some cockamamie plan where we steal money from Clayton.
Well, and I don't know if I told you this, but we've talked a lot about House Bill 3, which is Sandra Scott's opportunity allotment. She has never been able to get a hearing for that bill, which is something we as an organization talk about a lot. But she held her own informal hearing for her bill and collected public comment from folks who were supportive. And she also has a fiscal note, and I think her fiscal note only came out to $343 million, which I wonder if that is accurate, just given how many kids we have living in poverty in the state. But at the same time, it's like, if we could actually address one of the biggest, I would argue, one of the biggest shortcomings of the way we fund education in this state, with $343 million.
Yes.
I think we address so many of the concerns that we are seeing from parents who are advocating for vouchers, and I think can only help every single district. That would touch every single district, benefit every single representative and senator in that body. it's just insane to me that we're talking about potentially billions of public dollars to just what is more or less a black hole of spending.
So you're bringing up Sandra Scott brings this up, makes me think about this too. So, as Mikayla mentioned, Georgia is one of only 6 states without any funding to support students living in poverty. And Sandra Scott has House Bill 3 that we still hope to get a hearing on, even if it's not going to carry this year. But she's also a signer on a new bill, House Bill 668, which Representative Alalier just brought forward. We're talking bipartisan legislation, and even higher weight than what Sandra Scott has on her bill. And then to round things out, we have Senator Estevez and the other chamber brought Senate Bill 284. So we have 3 bills that would address that would create funding for students living in poverty. And I know that Fund Georgia's Future is going to do our best to get a hearing for those this year, even if they can't carry over this year. We know it's a heavy lift. But the fact that this is something that like no one was talking about 2-3 years ago, and because of the work of Fund Georgia's Future and groups like IDRA and GPI and others, we now have 3 just very promising bills that could go a long way. One with bipartisan support.
Really exciting. And I think it was really interesting. I talked to Jason, and it's really a shame to me that he's not on our Senate Ed committee because he's just so plugged into issues around education.
Yeah, he's a board chair.
For one of the largest school districts and one of the largest school district budgets in the state. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. And also just like has killed the Buckhead City legislation, just as a side note. But he was like, I didn't add I know I didn't add a lot of the other concerns that we have. I didn't touch transportation. I didn't touch school counselors. That's because I truly just want us to focus on talking about this one issue, which we have been talking about for so long, which I really appreciate. It is truly a simple bill. And I'm really excited about both sides of it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to take too much more of your time. Any other, do you want to talk about HB 101 real quick?
I don't really know what happened. House Bill 101 was not on any of our radars because it was originally like a 2-page tax bill.
That's right.
And then
it's for rural hospitals, I think.
Yes, for grants for rural hospitals. So like it wasn't on anybody's radar. This morning Ways and Means met and added in language for a bunch of different issues. It's longer by I think another 10 pages now, so I haven't gone through the whole thing. But what's most important is at the very bottom, on the very last page, it adds funding for the school scholarship organization tax credit. And I believe it's $10 million a year for the next 5 years, which just increases the cap from 120 to
130.
Yeah, 130. Well, but it has a sunset for 2028. Is that just for the extra to be 130 over the next 5 years?
I'm pretty sure that language, the sunset language, was taken out.
They also, I think they may have taken out the $10 million each year, because there was a conversation about it being 10 million, not just 10 million, but 10 million each year.
Yeah, the text that I saw, it just raised it to 130 million, which in the grand scheme of vouchers is not that much. But when you think about the amount of work we do for childcare supports, for need-based aid, like the needs we have in this state, the fact that they can just slip $10 million into a private school voucher that we have no idea if it's providing any value to the state of Georgia shows that this is more driven by getting an ideological win than actually helping.
Absolutely.
Georgians. Any other things that we need to be cognizant of before we call it?
I don't think so. A lot of our stuff is kind of already crossed over. I think those are like our biggest red flag bills.
We still have the 27 odd million in the budget for school counselors.
Yeah,
which would be a big get, and that's in the big budget. Which
they also they added $10,000 for those school safety grants. So those bringing the total to $60,000. They actually dropped that back down to $50,000.
Good.
And reallocated that somewhere else. And I didn't follow where they put it, but that to me I think is, I mean, I don't know that we need those grants to begin with, but I think that is a good move. I'm hoping they reallocated that to early education, which is where they pulled it from to begin with, but I don't think they did. But yeah, no, I think that in general, those are most of the bills we're seeing. We've got some really good literacy bills kind of coming through from the House side. Also sports betting.
That's right.
House side, I do believe is on the floor on Monday. I don't think it passed out of committee this week. The
Mhm.
Senate side had a less great bill, but I think the House bill side is pretty shored up as like committing additional funding for K-12 education, and passed relatively uncontroversially. So I'm hoping we won't see it get absolutely just destroyed in the Senate side, but
Yeah, it definitely it was definitely a masterclass in how to get a bill that can get a lot of people angry, how to get it passed out of committee, because they debated it a while ago and then called it for a vote without debate. And it just like, all right, show of hands.
I will just say the relatively low excitability on the House side is something that I very much miss. I spent too much time paying attention to the House last year, and now I've just spent so much time paying attention to the Senate. I miss the House side of things.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I'm going to let you go. And this is going to conclude another episode of What Happened. Thanks,
I
Mikayla.
appreciate you always. I'll see you guys for crossover. It's just a long day of hearings. The main thing, like I said, is we're just watching for shenanigans. And they'll be called out on Twitter, but it is known to happen. It's less likely, I think, on Monday than it is on Signy Dies. So
Yeah,
relatively low excitement, I hope.
I hope so. All right. Thanks, Mikayla.
Yeah, thanks you. Have a good weekend.
Bye.